GameRanx presents another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight-up gameplay and some first impressions of the latest games releasing. I'm Andrew Gebbia, and today we're talking about Remnant from the Ashes. For those who don't know, this is a Souls-like looter shooter from Gunfire Games, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I had no idea this game even existed until it dropped, and all of you were talking about it. So first off, thank you for bringing this game to my attention, because boy am I happy that you all did, because I'm having an absolute blast with it. Remnant from the Ashes takes place in a post-apocalyptic world that's overrun by monsters called the Root, who kinda look like evil Groots, and I'm really sorry that rhymed, and they force humans into hiding. I'm gonna be honest, while I do think that Gunfire Games did a good job of building their own world and filling it with really cool looking monsters and environments, it's probably what I care about the least. The story and the lore aren't super interesting, and that's not at all what I'm sticking around for. The gameplay, on the other hand, is what is going to keep me playing. I think the combat is great, shooting is snappy and satisfying, and your guns are your primary weapons, with melee kind of being a secondary thing. Quick note on the melee, really quick though, I really like that you don't have to switch to your melee weapon to use it, but instead you just hit the attack button when you're not aiming down sights, and then you instantly start swinging your weapon. This makes the combat flow really well, I think. There's no blocking, so dodging is the name of the game here. So you'll be shooting an enemy, then turning around to hit the enemy that's right in your face with your melee weapon, then rolling out of the way of a range attack from another enemy. So combat can get pretty hectic, and even at its hardest, it's still fun and controls it very well, and it's definitely my favorite part of the game. But there's more to combat than just that. There are also different mods that you can attach to your weapons, each one having its own active ability. There's one that sets your bullets on fire, causing burn damage to enemies. There's one that kind of turns your weapon into a grenade launcher for a bit, and it deals out explosive damage. And it even changes the reticle and how the gun fires. Then there are other ones that will highlight enemies for you, or reduce weapon sway, or even reduce the amount of damage you take from ranged or melee attacks. These mods are really what you're working for, as well as weapons, which you can craft using materials that you drop from bosses. Besides killing bosses to craft new gear, you'll also find weapons, armors, and other items out in the world. They feel like secrets, though, like you really have to be looking for them, but you can actually get by with just continuing to upgrade the stuff that you already have. You don't even have to look for more gear. A few hours into the game, and I was still using the starting weapons I was given, but I just kept upgrading them and throwing different mods on them. I'm really into crafting unique weapons and mods from killing bosses, but I do wish there was a little more to find out in the world, and I wish I dropped loot a little more frequently. I'm a big fan of games like Destiny and The Division and other looter shooters, which are always throwing new loot at you. I don't know if I'd want new loot as often as those games give it to you, but I definitely like it a little bit more close to games like that. The enemy design is refreshing as well. Each area has different sets of grunt enemies and different sets of elites, so each encounter feels completely different than the last. And for the most part, most enemies are actually really fun to fight. Yeah, there are some annoying ones for sure, but overall it's fun to take them on. Just like other Souls-like games, Remnant is laid out in sections with checkpoints, which are actually crystals and are essentially Dark Souls bonfires. You make your way through an area, taking out enemies and looting as you make your way through to the next crystal, then you face off against that area's boss. So a very similar layout to Dark Souls, and you're opening up different shortcuts as you're going along as well. You know the drill here. Although, unlike other Souls-like games, there's no penalty for dying. This was really weird at first. I'm so used to playing super carefully so I don't die and lose all my souls, but here you can die all you want and there's no penalty for it really, besides having to start over, which I must say is a nice change of pace. I love the difficulty that comes with these types of games, and I love the whole losing your souls when you die thing, but I'm totally fine with taking a quick break from that mechanic, honestly. Just this once. It's been leading to me playing a little bit more aggressively than I usually would in a game like this, and it's been a lot of fun. There's also a hub world called Ward 13 that's just like Firelink Shrine, and here is where you go to interact with NPCs that will upgrade your weapons, gear, and Dragonheart, which is Remnant's Estus Flask. The character progression in Remnant is a little different from other games. Leveling up rewards you with a trait point that you can use on a selection of skills that level up your stamina, your health, you know, the normal stuff. But what's kind of cool and different is you don't earn new skills by leveling up. You actually earn them from a bunch of different things. Killing bosses, playing co-op for the first time, reviving X amount of other players. And I gotta say, it was kind of fun to have new perks just kind of pop up out of nowhere, giving me another thing to dump trait points into and making my character that much more different. It was a nice change of pace from dumping skill points into a already mapped out skill tree that I could see laid out in front of me. One of the more interesting things about Remnant is that the campaign is actually dynamically generated. So there are pre-rendered chunks of environment that are tossed together when you first spawn into an area, meaning that bosses have variants and may appear in different spots, dungeons aren't always in the same place, and the same goes for enemy placement as well. Even small little things change. For example, there's an item in the game called the Strange Coin that you can hand into an NPC at the hub world that will give you a new weapon. I've seen people online who have this item appear in a totally different spot than where it appeared for me. There are also some things that just won't spawn into your campaign, so if you're into replaying games, you'll be a fan of this because starting a new game means it'll be laid out entirely different than your previous playthrough. It also means that playing with other players will be different as well, seeing as you'll be playing in their world and not yours. If you don't like how your world is laid out, you can actually re-roll your campaign, which will regenerate the world, but keep your character progression. But unfortunately, with the dynamically generated map, it kind of makes it so nothing really stands out environmentally. There's no spot that I'm really going to remember, and the same goes for boss rooms. One of the easiest ways to see how the dynamic generation works is by playing co-op. While the co-op is awesome and seamless, and playing with other players or friends is the way to go, there are some things that I'm not crazy about. For one, I'm pretty sure there's no in-game communication, at least if there is, I couldn't find it, and trust me, I really looked. Not that you need a ton of communication here, but sometimes you'll be waiting to get into another area and your teammate could be off wandering around, keeping you from getting into the next area. Yeah, you can use Discord or something, but for randoms, that can be a bit of a hassle. Also, and this is probably one of my biggest gripes with the game, if you queue into someone else's game, your solo progress does not carry over back to your game, which I found out the hard way. That really annoys me. I get that it still benefits me to jump into someone else's game because I still get XP and materials and anything I find, but having to redo some of the bosses was just kind of annoying. Although I did play through one entire area in someone else's game, and when I went back to do that whole area in my game, the bosses were different, so there at least is that. But with all that aside, co-op is the way to play this game, and I'd even say that there are some boss fights that you need to do with other players. When you fight a boss, you're also fighting smaller enemies that they spawn, and sometimes there is just way too much going on, and the difficulty spike really calls for co-op. Remnant from the Ashes is an overall solid game that I didn't know I wanted until I sat down to play it. If you're a fan of Souls-like games, looter shooters, and co-op games, I would definitely recommend checking it out. It's honestly pretty refreshing. The setting is different from other looter shooters and Souls-type games, and taking the basic combat from a Souls game and adding guns is a super simple but also super fun idea. While I definitely wanted more out of the narrative and the loot system, this is probably one of my favorite games in the genre, and if Gunfire Games plans on making a sequel and making some changes to it, I think they have a really, really awesome IP on their hands that will do really well. But that's how Before You Buy works. We give you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinions thrown in, but now I want to hear from all of you. If you've been playing, what do you like about this game? And if you haven't been, what are your thoughts on it, and do you think you'll pick it up? Leave it all down in the comments. We'll be down there talking to you. If you have any other questions or want to yell at me, you can find me on Twitter at Andrew Gebbia. If you had fun with this video, clicking the like button really helps us out. And if you're new here, we put videos out every single day. As always, thanks for stopping by to hang out with us. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.